Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and German Chancellor Angela Merkel signed 8 major deals in Berlin today. We are looking at outcome-oriented momentum in India-Germany ties and a quantum jump, especially in economic ties, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi said after the meeting, describing the two countries as made for each other. Meanwhile, Merkel praised India as a reliable partner. She will meet Chinese Premier Li Keqiang later this week. Merkel has long cultivated strategic relations with India and often stresses that Germany and the European Union must compete with the new emerging economic giants. On Sunday, she said that Germany can no longer completely depend on traditional allies, the United States and Britain, in the age of President Donald Trump and Brexit. Prime Minister Modi and Merkel addressed stalled talks on an EU-India free trade and investment deal at a time when New Delhi is uncomfortable with Beijing's Silk Road trade and infrastructure initiatives across Eurasia. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the importance of the Modi-Merkel meet in the changing global scenario. Joining me on the program today are Pramit Chaudhuri, foreign editor of the Hindustan Times, SK Jindal, chairman investments and capital markets, ASSOCHAM, Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat. He has been the ambassador to several European countries, Rajendra Jain, professor, Center for European Studies, JNU. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Pramit, I'd like to start with you, of course. How significant is the Prime Minister's visit to Germany, considering what has been happening around the world?
Well, what you're seeing now, as both Indian and German diplomats have been telling people, that there is a desire by both governments to develop what one German diplomat called middle power cooperation. At a time when America is becoming unpredictable and China is becoming much more assertive, a lot of the other countries in between are now looking at it and saying that maybe we need to step into the gaps that are being created, and in some cases countering, in the case of China, some of the attempts to change the structure of the international system. So Germany, by far the most powerful and the wealthiest of the European nations, India, obviously the dominant player in the South Asian and Indian Ocean region, are two countries that are now looking at each other much more intently. You mentioned what Angela Merkel said, that Germany needs to be looking at other countries at a time when America is proving difficult to work with. And we, of course, have our concerns about China. And the Germans privately will also say that they are nervous about what China is starting to insist. Germany, for example, endorsed the One Belt, One Road program initially, and then at the forum refused to agree to certain some of the agreements that came out on the grounds that the Chinese were effectively not being transparent enough about what they were doing. So that is really the geopolitical basis of why these two countries are now trying to look at each other much more closely.
Fair enough. Ambassador Sajjanhar, as far as this visit itself is concerned, what do you believe are the key areas that were touched upon and the takeaways really from this visit?
Two or three things I would like to focus on. Number one, of course, is trade and investment. I think, as you had mentioned yourself, Prime Minister Modi said made for each other. And I think this is a win-win proposition as far as the two countries are concerned. Several of the initiatives that the Indian government has taken recently, whether it is Make in India, it is Skill India, it is smart cities, it is infrastructure, it is digital India. So all these things, these are areas where Germany has great competence. So there is going to be great traction as far as the two countries are concerned. So I think what Mr. Modi has gone, he has tried to sell India to the business people in Germany. Of course, we've had these difficulties and problems, not only because of the fact that the bilateral trade and investment agreement negotiations for which started in 2007, 10 years ago. And at that time, we had thought that we'll be able to conclude the negotiations in 2 years. But they have been going on. So, and both, there are a variety of reasons. So, but that has not moved forward. And then the bilateral investment treaties with all the European countries have also been cancelled by India, and the draft that we gave to European Union in Brussels, that has not been found acceptable by EU. So I think there are these problems, but what Mr. Modi would have told them about all the initiatives that have been taken, whether it is on GST, whether it is on the bankruptcy code, whether it is on dealing with the non-performing assets in banks, the good monsoon, etc., across the board, that India has been the largest recipient of FDI last year, and it's a fast-growing major economy. So trade, investment, technology, capital, I think this is definitely one of the elements. The second element, I would say, is in terms of security, and that would be counter-terrorism. And Germany has suffered, France has suffered, Europe has suffered. We saw in Manchester recently, and of course, India has been a victim of terrorism. So how the two countries and EU and India can really cooperate and collaborate in dealing with this menace of terrorism. And I'm sure Prime Minister will speak also about terror emanating from Pakistan, not only as far as India is concerned, but also the world over, and the situation in Afghanistan, because both India and Germany are engaged very actively. Germany has, I think, about 900 troops. We don't have any boots on the ground, but more than $2.5 billion of assistance across the board.
Indeed.
And the third aspect is in terms of, what Pramit mentioned about the strategic partnership, because as Germany gets disillusioned with Mr. Trump's America because of its distractions and unpredictability and uncertainty, so it is looking around for partners. India has been looking around for partners, and in that context, our growing engagement with Japan, with Germany, with the other middle powers, with Australia.
Sure.
I think those are areas where we need to get together. And Germany and India have really been on the same wavelength, whether we have been talking about Indian Ocean as a strategic region, when we spoke about the South China Sea, in terms of the freedom of navigation, in terms of the importance of the award by UNCLOS. So I think across the board we have been, and of course we are partners in G20. Prime Minister Modi will again be going there
next month, yes.
Next in July. In July he'll be going to Hamburg. So I think that is there as far as reform of the UN Security Council is concerned. So across the board, I think there are a number of areas where they would have had a lot of things to chew together. But I think above all, how Germany and India can work together. Today it is bilateral trade is merely about 17-18 billion dollars.
We'll talk about bilateral trade a little ahead in the program, but I want to concentrate on something that Ambassador was talking about, Professor, about competency, and how does German competency measure up to Prime Minister Modi's vision of India?
Well, I think what Prime Minister Modi was trying to convey was that, especially after the Uttar Pradesh elections, with the GST reform in place now, that he is a man who is going to be in India for the next 7 years, a man who can get things done. I think since the strategic partnership in the year 2000, we've had the paradox of Indo-German relations has been that despite any political problems, our trade relationship remains modest, just about 17.5 billion euros, whereas China's trade is about 10 times as much. Now, this definitely limits the degree of interest which Germany has on the trade and economic front. I think one area which was perhaps underexplored during this trip was where we could not have much play was the Germans are also keen to have a government-to-government defense procurement agreement like the one that we have with France. But three issues, apparently more work needs to be done in this area, and three issues are going to be prominent. First of all, the Germans have been somewhat in the past reticent in the transfer of technology.
Yes.
Secondly, of course, is the question of the offset. Third problem is going to be the German export control regime, which has certain restrictions, statutory restrictions about transfer of weaponry to conflict-prone areas. I think much more work needs to be done in this area, but I think discussions have gone forward because the Germans have lost out on the aircraft deal. The fact that the Defense Ministry has announced a new way to associate private players I think German companies would be comparatively more comfortable with private companies rather than the government players, which have clearly failed to deliver. But I think you see this needs a bit more time. The second area I think where discussions have been held is on the area of civil nuclear cooperation. Given Germany's history and its reluctance to get more involved, but I think nuclear safety especially is an area where we can have some meaningful cooperation with the Germans. But overall, I think we also have to view this in the perspective of what is the state of the European Union today. You know, this kind of navel gazing with Brexit surrounded as it is by all kinds of crises around it. The relative geopolitical importance of Germany has increased considerably in the eyes of India.
Sure.
And I think President Modi had across the board discussions with Chancellor Merkel, who again has very bright prospects in winning the next elections. I think again he was trying to give a nudge to the India-EU FTA. He did this 2 years ago, but we still, you know, we've had 16 rounds, 2 stock-taking rounds, but we have not yet moved forward. On the investment, I think, you know, it was a difficult task conveying to the Europeans that, you know, after the cancellation, as Ambassador Sajjanhar was saying, of the bilateral investment treaties, the EU has yet to give a go-ahead on to proceed with the Indian draft. And this becomes a potential issue with German companies who seek to tap India's vast market and invest in a rapidly growing 7% plus economy like India. But I think, you know, Germany has clearly emerged as the leader of Europe. And we are both for a policy in favor of globalization.
Sure.
And keeping free trade open, especially after the inward-looking attitude of the Trump administration. So overall, I think it was. And then the hallmark of the Indo-German relationship has been that you do not see, you know, major transformative developments. It's more of an incremental consolidation kind of a progress. And I think that is what we have witnessed in this visit as well.
Sure. Mr. Jindal, you know, a lot has been said about trade and economics. Do you believe that this visit to Prime Minister Modi to Germany, the visit, of course, is still going on at the moment. He still has to meet the President Steinmeier. You know, as far as the visit itself is concerned, do you believe that India and Germany can take their bilateral relationship now to the next level?
Yes, I believe so. As you said, 8 agreements has already been signed. There are so many point of contacts and mutual cooperation. The potential is tremendous. Already 1600 German companies are working in India and 600 joint ventures are functioning in India with Germany. 25 working groups are operational. With the help of these, so much of interaction and deliberation is happening that lot of potential is there, and the ties between the two leaders are very, very good. And to unleash the power of mutual cooperation, the potential which exists between our two countries, Germany is the largest, strongest power in Europe, and Europe, such a large portion, it is very critical for us to cooperate in a big way with them. Europe is our largest trade partner. Germany is our largest trade partner also, as we have seen. Leading source of FDI. So all these things, if we deliberate and interact more, like it is happening now, this can grow further. If we don't, then everybody is busy with his own things and things will not happen. So these kind of interaction and deliberations are very, very important, and they must happen from time to time. You exchange all the new things, what you have done on your end and what they have done at their end, and new things come. You take benefit of their experiences and they get benefit of our experiences and our strength. So this sharing of strengths and experiences happen only when we meet and discuss together at such levels. This gives boost to the economic ties. So this is the way forward. Now, after this meeting, host of meetings which will take place between the different ministers, etc., a new roadmap will be made from taking it from here onwards. So these kind of things, they do help, and any differences, etc., any problems, any confusions, they can be removed during this. So this is the way forward, and I am very hopeful, very optimistic that this will be very helpful for both the sides.
Sure.
India has so much of potential, so much of demand, and that is why both the sides will get benefited.
Fair enough. Pramit, a lot has been said about potential and a lot has been said about the relationship between India and Germany and how Germany is India's largest trade partner in Europe. But has that potential fully been tapped, or do you believe there's much more work still to be done?
Yes, much more can be done. Besides the obvious trade and investment story that we're looking at, the issue is a strategic relationship. At present, that really does not exist. We look at what has happened, for example, in India and Japan. Japan has now made a committed official decision across its entire government, across its parties, to try and build up India as an economy and as a Asian power, if you wish, for strategic reasons. Obviously, for them, it's about balancing China and various other issues. But for the Japanese now, committing literally tens of billions of dollars are being invested in India to build infrastructure, to develop projects with India, and even in third countries. And a lot of Japanese companies have essentially come here even though they're not even making a profit. About only half of them are making a profit in India right now. But there's been a concerted effort by Japan that the whole idea is to make India something greater than it is, would normally be even on its present growth trajectory. Now, Japan is very similar to Germany in many ways. It is a country that has this World War II legacy. It has a pacifist constitution. It has generally been reluctant to play a global role because of the various hedges it has on its use of power. But it's been able to get out of that shell. Germany, Indian government still hopes to get a similar, perhaps nothing quite as dramatic as Japan, which even now is looking at the military side, which Germany would be very reluctant to go down. But the sense that Germany could do a lot more if it thought about India in a global perspective, is what India is really hoping that we'll get from Germany at some point, which is why we go back to this issue of middle power coordination and cooperation. That while China may have been the primary motivator for Japan, in many ways America, or the uncertainty about America, we're hoping will be the primary motivator for Germany.
Sure.
But that's a long-term game, and this is really just a first step in that direction.
That's a very valid point that you're making. Ambassador, taking that point forward, why hasn't this transformation really happened as far as India and German ties are concerned? What's the problem really? Is Germany skeptical about India somewhere?
I guess, you could say that to an extent, because India, all said and done, is a reluctant free trader. Meaning we are not, we still have, because of a large population, because of the need to create jobs, we are not, we move forward slowly. We take 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. That is the reason why even the regional comprehensive economic partnership on the east, that has also not borne fruit, although that was not an agreement that could be compared with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Many analysts and commentators in India were saying, why is India not joining the TPP? Because there the standards were so high. Now, of course, TPP has been abandoned. But even RCEP, we are not really able to take it forward because the whole concept of providing jobs, getting up the manufacturing ladder from 17–18% to 25%, that is the objective. And if we are opening up our own markets, then what happens to your Make in India program? So, there are all these issues. There has been, and of course, China has been much more attractive as far as Europe is concerned. So, we really have to look at it that way, that Germany has been engaged and involved as far as Europe is concerned. And of course, there has been the certainty and reliability as far as the United States, the transatlantic partnership is concerned. That is more than $500 billion per year. That is the sort of trade volumes that we are talking about across the Atlantic. So I think there have been those interests. So India has not really been of great interest as far as Germany is concerned. And India has had its own issues and problems in its own region.
Sure.
But I think now going forward, I'd like to sort of, just mention 2 points. One is the timing of the visit. On one side, you have the Belt Road Forum coming up, which is a Sino-centric. We have termed it as a new colonial enterprise. But you know, it is a Sino-centric trade enhancing arrangement. And you call it one belt and one road. That means all belts and all roads lead only to China. And I think that is bound to make people nervous. It makes countries like India nervous for more reasons than this, because of the issue of sovereignty and territorial integrity as far as China-Pakistan economic corridor is concerned.
I think Germany too, Professor, has realized that somewhere down the line, and you know, they, after initially supporting OBOR, then said no, that it is too China-centric. Do you believe right now, though, considering what has been happening around the world, considering what Merkel has said about Trump, you know, over this past weekend, that it's the most opportune time for like-minded countries to come together? And are we seeing a realignment of sorts on the world stage?
Just before I come to that, I just give one major reason why the India-German relationship has not moved very much forward. That is because of the lack of the interest of the small and medium enterprises. You know, that is the USP of Germany. And the German SMEs have traditionally had a 500-mile radius concept. They have not looked beyond that. That, I think, can provide a very strong fillip to developing our relationship. Now, in regard to the question, do you see a geopolitical realignment? I think that's going a bit too far. I think despite the displeasure with Trump's announcement about not going ahead with the climate change deal, him calling into question the transatlantic relationship, asking the NATO countries to spend more, and so on and so forth. But as Chancellor Merkel said today, the transatlantic relationship does remain important. But I think two areas are important. Number one, that is in the field of climate change. We have the Chinese Prime Minister in Germany later this week. And with the Americans reneging on this commitment, India and China are looked as future strong partners to uphold the Paris Agreement. And India, as you know, has one of the most ambitious programs in renewable energy.
Right.
And that, by the way, has been a very strong, successful enterprise between India and Germany, building on what happened 2 years ago and even now during this visit. Secondly, I think, is this concern about a rule-based global order. And I would share with Pramit, there is growing concern about China, about that the rise of China may not be so peaceful after all.
Sure.
OBOR, I think there is a similarity of minds, not only because of transparency, sustainability, and environmental conditionalities that it would conform to. And the China Central European 16 Forum that is there has often been viewed as a kind of a Trojan horse into Germany's backyard, that this would ultimately undermine EU solidarity. So there are some genuine concerns we have. But I think the bigger concern is that to keep the world open for free trade.
Indeed, indeed.
I mean, there are concerns about American reversion to America first. And China, exactly as the biggest beneficiary of globalization, has not been exactly, has maximized, has the benefit the most, because the European Union has its highest trade deficit with China. So they are very concerned, and IP are concerned with China. So I think even though the size of the Indian market is 10 times smaller than China,
Sure.
but I think German companies are having a fresh look at India, that, okay, you know, we can't place all our eggs in the Chinese basket. And India, as a large market of 1.23 billion people, offers immense potential.
Indeed.
So that potential is yet to be realized.
That potential is yet to be realized. Is that potential going to be realized anytime soon? And what needs to be done for that potential to be realized, Mr. Jindal?
You see, the recent improvements and strengthening of our own nation by way of these major reforms like GST, like demonetization and other reforms. Our economy has become much more stronger, much more disciplined, much more organized, and much more formalized. This brings us more closer and more compatible with Germany and other nations of the world, developed nations of the world. That is why this timing will also help us to present them that now we are more prepared than ever before to join hands and to do things together. This is organic way of boosting ties, business, relationship, that when you go, you meet, you discuss, and you sort out things and you take them forward. So this is what is happening, and now as much as you meet, you realize more potential, new things happen. This is the way it is always done in the business also, and on company front also and country front also. So this is what is happening now. This is what we are seeing now.
Sure.
4 days, 6 days, 4 nations, and you cover so much, and you see then the results of it. I have this very positive feeling about this trip, that a lot good will happen there.
Okay, I've got about 2 minutes left on the program, so I'm going to get quick closing comments from all my guests, beginning with you, Pramit. You know, as far as what's to come really between the Indo-German relationship, there are several other meetings, you know, that will happen over the next 1 or 2 months. There's a G20 coming up as well. What can we expect in the near future?
Well, I think the G20 will be, Merkel being the host there, will attempt to further strengthen the argument in favor of the free trade, liberal trade order. She'll try to hem the Americans in on climate change. And those will be two of her primary interests. And one of the reasons she's wooing India and China is to make sure that they're on the same page with her.
Right. Okay. Ambassador, quick closing comment from you as well. Have we missed any opportunity this time around?
You know, I think I'll make 2 very short comments. Number 1, to take our relationship forward, we need political at the highest level, and I think that needs to be demonstrated both by Prime Minister Modi and I think the international configuration today is such that it forces them to come together. That having been said, I don't think that any of the countries is talking about not dealing with the United States or with Britain after Brexit. I think they continue to be active players, but since their role is not very certain, I think this congregation needs to come together, needs to pull up their socks and to start collaboration in a much more active manner.
Is that what we are going to see going forward, Professor? Multi-pronged approach being used by everyone?
I think what you're seeing across the board is all the major players are simultaneously engaging all the major players. The pace of, but each relationship is going to have its own individual dynamic and momentum. What I think we have to do with the Germans is to maintain this slow, steady consolidation and keep on emphasizing to the Germans that India is a long-term growth story which has enormous potential, and German companies ought to take a fresh look at India.
Indeed. So, Jindal, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I see it as a best ever opportunity of seeing boost in our relationship with Germany and especially the economic ties.
Fair enough. On that note, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Of course, on a very optimistic note, we are saying that the relationship is going to be taken to the next level. It remains to be seen, of course, what really happens in the days to come. Thank you to all my guests, Pramit Pal Chaudhuri, SK Jindal, Ashok Sajjanhar and Rajendra Jain, for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching. See you again next time.